Okay, so in line with what we've been talking about a lot about video games. But
big butt.
Oh, yeah. Well, I like the big butts, and I cannot lie. The thing about it is, there is a version of this that you can apply to tabletop RPGs. And that is, editions. And since you are the expert when it comes to tabletop gaming, maybe you can give people a little bit of a definition of what editions are.
I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I mean...
Comparatively
I can
me.
pretend.
Yeah.
So, different editions for tabletop RPGs. If you've been following us for a while now, you know we enjoy our tabletop games a bit. Or talking about them, even if we've never played them.
Right, exactly.
In some cases. But you're probably also familiar with different editions of tabletop RPGs. So, D&D is currently in its 5th edition. And so... For Nathan, my not as ignorant as he used to be co-host here, the different editions of RPGs tend to just be new iterations of rules, upgrades to the mechanics systems. They take kind of what works and improve upon it, or keep what works and improve upon things that didn't work so well, or they want to change because it was complained about or unbalanced. So a lot of that with editions is a lot of rules upgrades for games.
Sure.
In some cases as well, they will upgrade the settings. I don't feel like that's as important to editions typically, because it's kind of like, for D&D, it's kind of generic world setting most of the time. I think 5th E takes place primarily in the core rulebooks in the Forgotten Realms.
Sure.
And sure, they'll add more lore to that too, but generally the 5th edition is different from 4th edition because of rules and mechanics, how you play, and how all the things kind of function. A lot of the cases when an RPG system will make a new edition, it is to streamline.
Right. And I think that's really important to explain, especially for novices or people that have not been very familiar with tabletop gaming, because if you pick up, like, a copy of, like, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, and you have another one that's, like, 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons, there's a lot of people who are not familiar with this that might think, they're pretty much the same. No, they do not. You can't intermingle. Like, if you think you're gonna pick up, like, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, I could use, like, a campaign from 4 and it's gonna work. No, it really won't. The rules are completely different. It's like a whole new game, even though it still has Dungeons and Dragons on it. And they've gone through, if I remember correctly, even though we're on edition 5, there's technically like 6, right? Because we had like 3.5, 3 and then 3.5, or
3.5 wasn't its own edition.
Okay.
Per se, it was 3.0 came out, and then they went, we fucked up in a lot of places.
Yeah.
We're gonna fix a lot of things, and here's 3.5.
Got it. Okay. And 3.5 was really used more than 3, if I remember correctly.
I don't think 3. I don't remember much of having just 3.
Right. My understanding of it, from what I know, is that they had 3, they realized that they needed to make adjustments, they got to 3.5 fairly quick, and then it pretty much was 3.5 was the edition for a really long time before 4 came out.
Yeah, that was up until 4 came out.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's how edition numbers work.
Right, but there was a long period of time between 3.5 and 4, right? I thought there was like...
I don't know how many years.
Okay.
Probably, yeah, at least.
Mm.
And of course, then from 3.5, it spawned people who loved the 3.5 rule set but didn't like 4th edition spawned Pathfinder.
Right, exactly. And that was the open game license.
Open gaming license,
Yeah.
3.5 SRD rules.
Sure. Here's a timeline. I have a brief timeline.
Oh, good.
So original Dungeons & Dragons would have been 1974. Advanced Dungeons & Dragons was in 77. Let's see, second edition of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons was in 89. Third edition was in 2000, and then 3.5 was in 2003. 2008, you had 4th edition. So
3.5 was about a 5-year, 6-year cycle, almost.
Yeah, from 3rd edition all the way to 4th, you had like 8 years, but 3 years in, they got the updated 3.5. So
Okay.
yeah, and then 5th edition comes in 2014. So actually, 4th edition stuck around for a little while, but
Wow. So 6th edition should be soon then, judging by their cycles.
yeah, but I'm gonna guess that it's probably gonna be a little while, because people seem pretty happy with 5, so they might not want to do much with it.
Yeah, and they keep bumping out content for 5, so I'll
It's
give it
probably a while.
another couple of years.
Another couple of years. There's also a possibility you might end up with just a 5.5. They might just do an update of the rule set because they don't want to change all the books around yet. I'm actually really surprised with the length of time that, like, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons stuck around.
Up until 3rd in 2000.
Yeah, from 77 to 2000, basically. They had the 2nd edition that they did in that time frame, but I don't think that the rule set changed dramatically between that. I think they were still working on THAC0 for all that time.
Now, I would like you to pull up a timeline of editions for Warhammer 40k.
Okay, I can do that.
For me, really quick.
Editions of Warhammer 40k. Yeah, let me see if I can find it. Okay, here we go. Let me see here.
Let's look at this timeline.
Yeah, let's look at this timeline. Okay, your first edition was done in 18. I'll tell you about a magical place called Warhammer from 1855. No,
Imagine if they had figured out any of that stuff that long ago. I'd been like, what?
I know, 40,000 years ago. That's why they call it that. No, the first edition was in 1987. Okay.
Same year I was born.
Yeah, that was the first edition of Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader. It was published in 87. Okay, so let's see. 2nd edition is 93. 3rd is in 98. 4th, 2004. 5th is 2008. 6th in 2012. 7th in 2014. 8th in 2017. Boy, they have some short cycles between these things.
They have really short cycles.
Yeah, 2017, and then 2020 was 9th.
Yeah.
9th edition.
I stopped playing, actually playing, I haven't played since 4th or 5th edition, 40k.
Yeah. Yeah.
And do you see how many editions behind I would be if I started playing again?
Oh, yeah. It wouldn't take very long.
And not only that, for 40k, it's not just that's the general rulebook. That's the core rules. That's not including your codexes for your armies rulebooks.
Okay, great.
Which don't always match up with the same cycles.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you're not on 9th edition Space Marine Codex. You're on, like, I don't know, probably 8th edition Codex or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a lot, because with them overhauling that, it's different than D&D, because D&D, you're not typically buying a whole-ass army worth of miniatures that are based upon what your rulebook says you need to play the game.
Right.
But Warhammer, like, yeah, we change this around, change those points around. These guys, you can't have as many, or you need more of these. And then, like, oh yeah, there's all these rules for all these new models that we now sell.
Right. Exactly. It does make me kind of appreciate, like, when I believe Savage Worlds is one of those cases where they didn't really change editions at any point. They just kind of kept adding on and modifying so that you never really ran out. Like, the old editions can still be utilized in the new settings because they didn't want to just completely overhaul the whole thing. But I can see the case for where you can't necessarily do that. Like, we wouldn't have wanted to stick with THAC0. No one wants that. You wouldn't want to keep going with it. So you'd have to do an overhaul to the armor class system, and there's really no way around that unless you just completely overhaul the system. Or could you?
Maybe. So here's the thing with tabletop, though, as opposed to video games. When you have a remaster for a video game, to play that remaster, you have to, buy that. Now, if you would like to play the game, say your edition of Deus Ex, the original version, you need to mod that to be able to play it. You need the hardware capabilities and the software capabilities to be able to line up so you can play that.
Sure.
So there's a case for the remasters in those cases, in that situation where it becomes better to play the remaster because you can actually play it, for instance.
Oh yeah.
With tabletop, if I want to play in 3.5 D&D, as long as I have the rule books or the rules for it, I can still play in 3.5.
Yeah.
There becomes no technical limitation there.
Right.
If I want to play with Thaco.
Okay.
I mean, if I wanted to, I could. If I want to be an elf as a class, I can. If I want to play
class, yeah.
If I want to play 4th edition Warhammer 40k, I can't. Like, I'd have to find people that would love to play that edition of that game with me and have the right stuff for that era of the game. But as long as you have the materials for it, you still can.
Right. Could I be an elf clown?
I don't think clown was a class in Advanced D&D, Nathan.
No.
It's just a personality trait.
There was a point where I think clown was supposed to be a class. I can't remember.
I feel like you don't want to look this up because you're going to get some weird-ass homebrew.
I'm going to get... No. I think, There was a whole article I once read. Maybe we can eventually do a segment on it about the weirdest classes that they had in D&D throughout its history. There's but I believe that if I go to the very end, there are clowns. I'll tell you if I find it. But I will say that your point is well taken, though, because if you have video games, there are technical limitations that are going to make the game not nearly as good unless you get modern hardware and modern technology. But with a tabletop game, you're still using the basic hardware, no matter how much they update the rule sets. They just learn from mistakes of the past or realize that they don't like doing things a certain way or want to streamline it.
Or they make mistakes and make 4th edition D&D.
Or they do that. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so maybe not clown. I swear clown was a thing. Jester. There we go. It's a bard class.
Ah, of course it is.
Jesters. Yeah. There are some odd ones that they've had over the years and probably continue to still have. There's a master thrower. Go figure. You're good at throwing things. It's apparently a thing. So maybe some things don't age as well as others. Street Fighter. Oh, I like that game. It'd be fun. You could have a whole You could have a whole party of just Street Fighters, and you could pretend that you're in Double Dragon or something.
You just do Fight Club, and you just don't talk the entire time because no one's talking about Fight Club.
D&D Fight Club. Let's make that happen.
No.
I think we don't talk about D&D Fight Club.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh. Roll for Brad Pitt.
No thanks.
Roll for Brad Pitt. No thanks. Congratulations. We achieved this. If you could, either with Warhammer.
Too many war games.
Some kind of war thing. If we were talking about some of the current editions that are out there that you're familiar with, what's the kind of thing that you would like to overhaul if we ever got a new edition? Like, if we ever got that magical 6th edition of D&D.
Oh man, I have no idea. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I know for war games, I'd like to overhaul the turn systems, typically, because they slog.
Yep.
Like, it's just, you take your whole turn and move all 500 of your units, please. I'll be over here sitting there for an hour while you do this.
Yeah, I would think that you could maybe have you move one of the units, I move one of the units system. That might make more sense.
Yeah, that's when I was redesigning, or when I was working on the one I was working on. That's kind of what I wanted to do. It's I wanted it to be I move a unit, you move a unit, I move a unit, and you move down the line from like left to right or right to left. You know, you do it in order from one side of the table to the other. So it's I move, you move, I move, you move, you go back and forth until everyone's moved. If everyone who wants to move moves.
Right. Got it.
Because then it saves time, and then the whole combat thing, turn-based combat in a game like that, in Warhammer, for instance, means that hey, if you shoot first. Because you take the first turn, the enemy is losing a ton of units before they have a chance to do anything.
Yeah.
And it's like,
yeah,
that's not how war works. Sorry.
Right. And I know that like you had homebrewed a few different rules when it came to combat in even D&D to try and make it a little bit more dynamic than the way it's usually made.
Yeah.
So I mean, I could kind of see. I think the big thing that you had for that was the idea that if somebody takes their turn, the enemy doesn't necessarily have any way of counteracting that because they're dead before they do anything.
Yeah. So that was the typically, I haven't done this because I haven't played in a couple years now, but my thing was that if initiative order, everything happens in a 6-second cycle, so everyone gets their turn and then damage is accumulated. Essentially, you still take your damage on your turn if you get dealt damage, but the effects of that are then at the end of that round of combat. So if you get knocked out before your initiative order, technically, like, oh yeah, you're at -1 hit points, cool, I'm out. It's like, cool, you still get your round of combat because you're up while this is happening. You know, it's kind of silly to be like, oh yeah, you just get knocked out before you get a chance to do anything in combat. In the in the option of a surprise round, I think that's fine. For instance, if you're surprising the enemy, jumping on them, they don't get a chance to react. You get a round of combat before they get a chance to react. So if you knock them out or kill them before they can react, that is fine.
Sure.
But if it's a typical melee or combat and you are all acting at the same point in time, it's you're swinging a sword at the same time someone else is swinging a sword. Someone's casting a spell at the same time you're not casting a spell, whatever, you know?
Right. And in a lot of ways, that kind of makes it the same basic rule set as if you were playing like Magic the Gathering. Because when you attack and somebody blocks, they deal damage to you at the same time that you deal damage to them, unless somebody has first strike or something to that effect. So,
yeah. And the only other thing in like D&D I would love to see overhauled eventually, maybe if it's possible, is just the spells per day bullshit.
Okay.
And I know in a lot of cases the short rest thing now, you can get a lot of spells back from a lot of different classes, so you don't just lose all your versatility if you cast all your spells in one combat.
Sure.
You can be like, alright, we need to rest for 30 minutes instead of resting for 8 hours.
Right. I mean, that's why I like playing a monk, because literally a short rest, you just get all your key points back. Pretty much. I would imagine that is...
Dragons.
Yes, we would imagine dragons. There be dragons in Dungeons and Dragons, but I would imagine that seems like, especially with the integrated nature of the worlds of like a D&D and a Magic the Gathering, I would hope that they might be able to figure out how to utilize some of the mechanics from one in order to, enhance the other one.
Who knows?
Yeah, with the way Wizards of the Coast is. Just because they've introduced Ravnica and so many other things from Magic, into D&D. Maybe some of the mechanics could also just switch over, because they weren't bad mechanics in that game, in that game. So yeah, you maybe take the card game and apply some of the stuff to the RPG, or vice versa. Maybe. But okay, so we're basically at this point we're pretty much just brainstorming what version 6 is going to be of D&D.
I have no idea what they would do, so
Yeah.
who knows?
I mean, we don't know. We're just speculating, and badly at that.